Welcome to Culture Over Coffee, a podcast focused on improving company culture and fostering employee engagement. Every week, we chat with experts and thought leaders about the latest proven practices to reduce regrettable turnover, increase productivity, and retain key customers. So pour a cup of your favorite brew and join us. I'm your host, Beth Sunshine, SVP at Up Your Culture. In this episode, we're exploring why more than a third of employees say they don't receive enough recognition from managers or peers. We'll be breaking down why recognition remains so underutilized, what it costs your culture, and how to make it part of your daily rhythm. And here to help me make sense of it all is Kelly George, culture coach at Up Your Culture. Kelly offers great insights like how employees who feel recognized are 4 times more likely to be engaged at work, why offering vague praise is missing the chance to reinforce behaviors that you'd like to see more often. And finally, why recognition is one of the most powerful drivers in your toolkit to fuel engagement, performance, and retention. Well, hello, Kelly, and welcome to Culture Over Coffee.
Thanks, Beth. I'm glad to be here. It's always a pleasure.
I am so happy you're here. I'm really excited to, have you discuss the tough truth that was uncovered in our Engage 2025 report that a large percentage of employees feel unseen and unvalued. And you're a talent analyst, a culture coach. I know you're passionate about the power of recognition to transform workplace culture. And you're going to have a lot of valuable insight for our listeners. So I've been really looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too, because as you know, appreciation is my love language. And,
it is.
And one of the things I'll say I love about this particular topic, what we're going to talk about today, is it's very doable. There are simple things we can do with this. So I'm excited about our conversation.
I love that. And with that, we'll get started. The Engage 2025 report, which we're going to really focus on today, it reveals that over 1/3 of employees feel unrecognized by both their managers and their peers. In a world where we know that recognition drives engagement, why do you think it's still being overlooked?
That was really, I think, a fascinating statistic, right, in our report this year. And it's interesting because we all know, we really do, that recognition fuels engagement. Right. So why does it fall through the cracks? And I believe it's because it's not embedded into the daily rhythm of our work. So again, we showed that 36% of employees feel under-recognized. And again, that's a staggering number. And why it's so important is that we know employees who do feel recognized, that they're 4 times more likely to be highly engaged, 4 times more likely. So I don't think the problem is that leaders don't value recognition or maybe know how important it is. I wonder if it's because they're overwhelmed, they're distracted, and maybe sometimes just unsure. Right? Yeah. How to do this well. And so without those intentional structures, without habits, I think recognition can become a nice to have instead of the business imperative we really want it to be. So I think it's overlooked because it's treated as a bonus instead of what I would think of as more of a foundational driver of engagement and performance. And I wanted to throw in something else that was interesting from Gallup's recently released 2025 State of the Workplace report. They said only 21% of employees globally are engaged, and 70% of team engagement is directly attributable, and we know this from the work that we do, to the manager. But manager engagement is declining. It's around 27% right now. And that means that the leaders and managers that are responsible for giving recognition often aren't receiving it themselves. And what we know is that breakdown at that manager level will really trickle down to teams and create that kind of systemic recognition deficit that we're seeing.
Really well said. And I like the way when you were talking about it being overlooked, how you talked about how recognition has slowly become more of a bonus. I think that's interesting and something I just want to stew on a little bit. Let's talk about, with that in mind, that it being a bonus, the difference between recognition and appreciation. So why does calling out what someone did and why it mattered resonate so much more than just the generic thank you?
It's really important, Beth, that we're talking about this. Appreciation says, I see you. Recognition says, I see what you did, and here's why it mattered. So think about that distinction. It's everything, because recognition is connecting to the what. And a generic thank you, that might check the box, but it doesn't reinforce the value or the behavior. So in our report, Engage 2025, what we found is that recognition that's specific, also timely, and close to the behavior, and tied to impact, it boosts not only motivation, but performance. So if I, as a manager, offer vague praise, I'm missing the chance to reinforce behaviors that I want to see more of. But if I say, the way you handled that client call helped us retain the account, it validates effort and it reinforces that individual's contribution. So that's the kind of acknowledgement that really sticks with people and makes them want to bring their best again and know what that is.
I love that. So the report makes it clear when recognition is missing, people disengage. We see that. We know that. How does a lack of recognition show up in just day-to-day performance, morale, even in employee retention?
Well, I will say it doesn't just quietly exist. It shows up loudly. So we found that employees who don't feel recognized are twice as likely to be actively disengaged. That means every day on a day-to-day basis with performance, it's lower initiative, more absenteeism, a lack of discretionary effort. That means morale drops, collaboration suffers, and teams start operating in that survival mode instead of thriving. And so when people don't feel seen, they leave. And sometimes that means they leave the role, the company, or sometimes they leave emotionally. So this is not fluffy. This is fuel. And without it, the engine of your culture in an organization is going to start to sputter. And what's going to happen with that? How is this for a staggering ROI number? Gallup shows that disengagement costs the global economy $438 billion in lost productivity annually. $438 billion.
It is staggering. It is truly staggering. And although we understand that, you're right, using the word fluffy, a lot of times this is sort of considered the fluff and not the business of the operation, which it is. Great point. So you had mentioned middle managers earlier. That's something that I pay really close attention to as well. I want to drill down into that a little bit. The research shows middle managers are indeed feeling especially unseen. Only 58% of them say that they feel recognized by leadership. So in your opinion, why are they so often left out? And what does that signal to their teams?
Mm-hmm. Think about it. Middle managers, they are the bridge between strategy and execution, but sometimes they're treated like invisible workhorses. So, we saw in our report that 58% feel unrecognized by senior leadership, right? Or only 58% feel recognized, meaning we have 42%, almost half that number, that don't. That is, as you said, a troubling signal, because when the managers don't feel seen, it undermines their ability to energize their teams because of that bridge effect. It's a ripple effect. Managers who aren't recognized are less likely to pass that recognition down the chain. And so if leaders or an organization want their cultures to thrive, they can't afford to overlook the people that are holding everything together from the middle. And I think about middle managers, really, sometimes it feels like they're caught in the crossfire because they're accountable for executing strategy, but they also have to manage their team needs. So when they don't feel seen and supported, their ability to inspire the others that they're responsible for declines and teams notice. So disengaged managers can, and it's not always intentional, sometimes it's unintentional, but they can model apathy or burnout. And then that signals even more that recognition isn't a part of the culture and the way that we do things here. So the message becomes effort doesn't matter, and that's toxic.
It is. I think it's hard to pour from an empty cup, which is exactly what I hear you saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. So thinking more about recognition, we know it isn't a one size fits all kind of thing. It needs to be different for different people. What are some simple, effective ways that leaders can personalize recognition without making it too complicated? You had started out our conversation today saying this is something that's doable. It's something we can turn around. So
Yeah.
how would you recommend we do that?
Yes, this is why I love this topic so much, because it's so actionable and it can be surprisingly easy. It just requires attention. So the key is really how we personalize recognition. And again, it doesn't mean we have to have an elaborate program. It can start by just asking your team members as a manager how they like to be recognized. You know, some people on your team, they might really love a public shout out. Some people might just want a quiet note from you. And according to what we learned in our data this year, the most effective recognition is two things. It's personal and purposeful. So we talked earlier about being specific and tying to the what someone did, not just the thanking someone for it. So, you know, when we take into account someone's communication style, their recent wins, or even the language they use to describe their work, it can really help you as a leader tailor that recognition in a way that's going to feel most authentic and meaningful to that individual. So small gestures, but then when they're done with intention, go a long, long way. And I wanted to share in thinking about this podcast and what's, you know, really been so important to me over the years with recognition. I still have folders and boxes where I keep and read personal notes that were written to me over decades by some of my favorite managers. And this is partly why they were my favorite managers and my clients. And it matters. And those words of appreciation, but again, tied to what, right? What happened that caused us to win that account or help someone land that next role that they were really excited for? And what role, you know, might I have played in that? Yeah.
I can totally understand the concept of like a feel-good folder or something you dip into just to remind yourself why you're so valuable to an organization or a team or a person. You mentioned a couple of techniques. You talked about a public shout out versus maybe a quiet note. I'm wondering how that might look in an in-office situation versus more of a remote or a hybrid situation. If someone isn't physically in the building, obviously recognition can't be done in person. I'm wondering if you might have some creative ways, some effective ways that our listeners can use to deliver recognition virtually that still really hits the heart and feels authentic.
Yeah, I'm really glad we're talking about this also because, you know, we found that in our research this year that employees in hybrid settings sometimes feel slightly less recognized than their fully in office peers. So it's really important to be proactive around this. And sometimes there's a little bit more loneliness that we can see as well when individuals work virtually. So what I will say is virtual recognition does not have to feel robotic. It just needs to be human. And again, especially tied to the preferences of the individuals that you manage, right? And that you lead. So we've got a lot of great tools that help with that. Tools like Slack, team recognition platforms, they can be used to spotlight wins in real time. Again, something direct, like what about a surprise video message? Or a handwritten note that's mailed to that individual's home? Or what about a thoughtful LinkedIn endorsement, right? Recommendation. So again, it's about being human, and that authenticity, that travels across screens when it's rooted in sincerity. And at our company, as you know, we have our High Five Fridays, and we're a fully virtual company. So we do lots of things, including our monthly culture calls and lots of groups and special interest groups. I'm happy that I lead one of them in our organization as well, about our love of food and wine. But we have a High Five Friday in our Facebook group where we recognize one another each week for specific things that we did. To show up, to super serve, to collaborate. And it feels great to both give, and we talked about filling up our cups and pouring from a full cup. It feels great to give and receive that feedback. And it builds collaboration and teamwork across our organization. So those are just a few things that come to mind that are simple to get started with. I thought of something else too. Yeah. I love the idea of personalized video messages, but I saw recently digital kudos boards. That was pretty cool. And then I talked to a manager that is using a brief spotlight at the start of virtual meetings. So, you could just tag someone in a Teams channel with a quick story of their impact. That can go a long way. But what comes back to me most is the timeliness, that sincerity, consistency, and just recognizing what the different individuals on your team really want and value with that feedback.
So many great ideas. And as I'm listening to you speak, I'm sort of laughing internally because this is something, as you know, as we're talking about now, that is really important to me. It's something that I help other organizations do, help leaders become really comfortable with. And yet, as you're listing off all of these ideas, I'm thinking, well, gosh, I haven't done a lot of those things recently. And it just really drives the point home for me. I'm someone who's paying attention to this, thinking about this all the time. And gosh, I could do so many more of those things. I feel it in my heart. Am I actually acting on it? So I'm wondering, if we want recognition to become more of a habit, not just I need to remember to do that, the check mark on our to-do list every now and then, but we really want it to become part of how we are, how we lead others or how we exist on a team. What can leaders do to build it into the rhythm of their daily work and feel good about it all the time?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Beth, because I think anyone who's been a leader and manager feels the same way. I mean, it comes back to what we talked about earlier. It's we're busy. There are so many things that are on our plates. And so I have a mantra that I thought we could maybe incorporate into our podcast today. And it might be a great takeaway to help with that. And it's make recognition a ritual. So it sounds simple, but you're right. You're paying attention to this. You have expertise in this. And it's still something that we have to have reminders and remember. So habits stick when they are simple and they're repeatable and they're modeled from the top. So again, if you're a leader and you're listening to this podcast, you can build a culture of recognition just by starting every team meeting with a quick round of shout outs or setting a weekly goal to recognize 3 people on the team. So in our research this year, we showed that companies that have consistent, coming back to that habit and that ritual, consistent recognition practices see up to 23% higher employee satisfaction. So just thinking about how can you embed recognition into one-on-ones, team meeting, even performance dashboards, that's what can help turn it from maybe not just an afterthought or something that gets caught up in the busyness of things into the norm, the new normal. And that shift of making recognition a ritual, that is culture change right there.
I love that. And you mentioned how we do High Five Fridays. That's probably a really good example of making it a ritual because, I wake up Friday morning and I'm already thinking, who do I need to make sure to pat on the back today?
That's right.
We're starting out our meetings that way, if we're adding other ritual points, I can only imagine how comfortable and natural and just regular of a habit this would become. It's a great idea. And I like your mantra.
No, thank you. And like, you're right, because even we have a monthly culture call, right? Where we all come together. And that's a ritual that we have in our High Five Fridays. So I love that you brought those up because those are exactly what we're talking about. Yep.
Great advice. All right. So last question for you. For managers who realize that they've fallen into the recognition gap, exactly what we're talking about, what is one small, powerful thing that they can do today to help someone on their team feel truly seen and valued?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, I would say start small, but start today. So make a commitment. Just take an action item from this podcast as you go out that you're going to do one small thing. And one powerful but small thing today that you could do is just send a specific, authentic, heartfelt note to someone on your team, recognizing a recent contribution and explaining its impact. Again, not just great job, but the way you coach that new hire this week showed leadership and help us hit the ground running with their onboarding. So again, that recognition, that's specific and meaningful, that's going to have the lasting impact. And think about that. That one small action that you could start today would take less than 3 to 5 minutes, but it would really make someone feel seen. But that effect would last for weeks. Yeah. So I think I have sort of a takeaway as I'm thinking about this, because I really want us to make this a ritual. And this is the truth. It's not a nice to have. Recognition is a human need. Again, we're all humans. And one of the most powerful drivers in your toolkit for engagement, performance, and retention. So wherever you're leading in an organization, 2 people, 200 people, 200,000 people, your words and actions around recognition as a manager have the power to lift people up, to anchor them to the purpose of your organization and help reignite their motivation. So just starting small, being specific, but starting today. And be sincere. Yep.
I like that. And I like that your example about writing a note wasn't about something monumental. You don't have to wait until someone reaches their annual goal or, when they do something huge. You can recognize just the smaller behaviors that make them so wonderful and lead to those bigger things. So thank you for sharing that example. And thank you for bringing such warmth and wisdom to this conversation. You were the perfect person to bring in on this topic. If it's okay with you, we'll share your LinkedIn information in the show notes so our listeners can reach out and connect with you. They may want more of your wisdom. And then we'll also include the Engage 2025 report as well, so they can dig into the data you've discussed.
I would love that. I would love to hear from anyone. And I'm hopeful that many people will take a look at that report because it has such great data and also so many actionable ideas, right?
I agree. Thank you, Kelly. Until next time.
Until next time. Take care. Bye.
Thanks so much for spending time with us on Culture Over Coffee. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe and join us for every episode. For more helpful information about company culture and employee engagement, visit us at upyourculture.com.